After 6 years solo, my daughter's father returns, seeking to use her as a therapy doll for his grieving wife, who recently lost her baby. Hey everyone, I'm Melanie, and this is my story, one that's woven with struggle, resilience, and a mother's fierce love for her daughter. 6 years ago, my world was turned upside down when Jace, my then partner and Ellie's father, walked out on us. Ellie was just a baby. I remember holding her in my arms, bewildered and scared, wondering how we were going to make it on our own. But make it we did. Raising Ellie alone has not been easy. As a full-time nurse, I've juggled night shifts and long hours, all while trying to be there for every significant moment in Ellie's life. There have been days so exhausting that I felt like I couldn't stand, but then I'd look at Ellie's smile, hear her laughter, and all the fatigue would just melt away. She has been my joy and my anchor in the storm that life sometimes is. We've built a small but happy life together, just the two of us in our cozy apartment filled with pictures of our adventures, trips to the zoo, picnics in the park, and our annual beach vacation where we build sandcastles and chase waves. Ellie is a vibrant, curious child, filled with questions about the world around her and a love for animals that I swear she gets from me. We have our routines, our little traditions, like our Friday movie night, where we pile up on the couch with popcorn and watch whatever new cartoon we can find. It's our little bubble of happiness, safe and secure, built on a foundation of our shared love and resilience. Over the years, I've watched Ellie grow from a quiet baby into a spirited young girl with a kind heart and a wild imagination. Each night, as I tuck her into bed and kiss her forehead, I feel a mix of pride and relief. Pride in the little person she's becoming, and relief that despite the odds, I've been able to provide her with a stable and loving home. Jace's absence has been a shadow in our lives, mostly for me. Ellie barely remembers him, and I've tried to keep the bitterness out of my voice when she asks about her dad. How do you explain to a child that their father chose to leave, not because he didn't love her, but because he wasn't ready to be a dad? It's a conversation I've rehearsed 1,000 times in my mind, but never quite found the courage to have. So, when Jace suddenly reappeared, claiming he wanted to be part of Ellie's life again, it ripped open old wounds I thought had long since healed. Little did I know, his return would stir up a storm that threatened the peace and stability I'd fought so hard to create for Ellie and me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the day Jace came back into our lives, a day that started like any other, but ended with a revelation that changed everything. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon when the past decided to step back into my life without warning. I had just picked Ellie up from school, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder as she chatted animatedly about her day. Our laughter filled the car when my phone rang. Seeing Jace's name flash on the screen stopped me mid-sentence, a name I hadn't seen in years, not since he walked out and decided that fatherhood wasn't for him. With a trembling hand, I answered, "Hello, Jace?" "Melanie. Hey. It's been a long time." His voice came through, hesitant, laced with a nervousness that mirrored my own. "Yes, it has." "What do you want, Jace?" I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the turmoil inside. I was hoping we could meet. I'd like to talk to you and Ellie. It's important," he said, a seriousness to his voice that piqued my curiosity despite my reservations. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed to meet him at a local cafe the next day. Ellie, sensing the change in my mood, asked who was on the phone. "It was your dad, sweetheart. He wants to see us tomorrow," I explained, watching her reaction closely. Her eyes widened in surprise, a mix of curiosity and confusion, since Jace was more a concept than a memory to her. The next day, with Ellie by my side, I sat in the cafe, anxiously stirring my coffee as Jace walked in. His appearance had changed. He looked older, wearier, but his smile was the same as I remembered. Ellie eyed him curiously, clinging a little closer to my side. Jace got straight to the point once the initial awkward greetings were out of the way. "Melanie, I know I have no right to just come back after all these years and expect anything," he started, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "But I'm here because my wife Linda and I have been going through a tough time. She recently lost our baby and it's been really hard on her." I listened, a knot forming in my stomach, wondering where this was leading. "Linda has seen pictures of Ellie and heard me talk about her. She feels a connection, and I was thinking, maybe spending some time with Ellie might help her cope with her grief," Jace continued, finally looking up at me with a hopeful yet apprehensive gaze. The request struck me like a physical blow. It was too much, too sudden. I felt Ellie's grip tighten on my hand, her presence a grounding force. "Jace, you can't just walk back into her life and use Ellie as some kind of therapy for Linda. That's not fair to her. She's not a tool to be used for someone else's healing, I responded, my voice firm yet careful, aware of Ellie listening closely. Jace seemed taken aback, perhaps not expecting my immediate resistance. I know it's a lot to ask, Melanie, I do. I just thought, I hoped it might be good for everyone. Good for everyone? Or just good for Linda? I couldn't help but ask, the protective mother in me rising to the fore. Jace's return and this bizarre request had stirred a storm of emotions in me, and I needed time to think, to process what was best for Ellie, not for Jace or Linda. We left the cafe with the issue unresolved, Jace's plea hanging heavily between us. As Ellie and I walked back to our car, her hand in mine, I knew this was just the beginning of what could potentially unravel the peace and stability I had fought so hard to build for us after he had left. The thought of explaining this to Ellie weighed heavily on me, but I knew honesty was the key. She deserved the truth, and she needed to understand that sometimes, even parents could make profoundly selfish mistakes. That night after our meeting with Jace, sleep eluded me. Ellie, oblivious to the depth of the situation, had fallen asleep quickly, her breathing steady and calm. I sat by her bedside, watching the rise and fall of her chest, the serene expression on her face. It was in these quiet moments, observing the innocence of my daughter's slumber, that the weight of Jace's request truly hit me. He wasn't just asking for Ellie to meet Linda, he was proposing that Ellie become a source of emotional comfort for his wife, using her presence to help Linda heal from the trauma of their loss. The term therapy doll echoed in my mind, a term I'd read about in articles discussing emotional support strategies where individuals use objects or pets as sources of comfort to alleviate psychological pain. The idea of my daughter being used in a similar way, as a human stand-in to provide solace for Linda's suffering, felt deeply wrong. Children are perceptive. They feel deeply and absorb the emotions of those around them. Subjecting Ellie to the role of a caregiver for an adult's grief could impose an emotional burden on her, potentially affecting her own mental well-being. My protective instincts screamed that this was not a role for Ellie, yet Jace's plea from earlier that day haunted me. He had spoken of Linda's connection to Ellie, how knowing her, even just from photos and stories, had given Linda a sense of hope. And now, he was dangling an offer of financial and emotional support, a tempting proposition for any single mother navigating life's challenges on her own. The next day, Jace called again. As the phone rang, I braced myself for the conversation. Jace's name flashed on the screen, and I answered with a mix of apprehension and a resolve to protect Ellie at all costs. Melanie, I've been thinking about our talk yesterday, Jace began, his voice carrying an uneasy calm. I know it's a lot to ask of Ellie, but having her around could really help Linda. And I want to be part of Ellie's life too. I missed so much already. I want to make it right. I listened, tensing at his words, recognizing the manipulation laced within them. Jace, Ellie isn't a tool to patch up the cracks in your current family dynamics. She's a child, not a therapist or an emotional bandage for Linda, I replied, my voice steady despite the churning anger inside. But think about the stability it could offer Ellie, Jace countered quickly. I'm in a position to help financially. We could make sure she has everything she needs, better schools, a college fund. Isn't that something worth considering? His offer dangled before me like a carrot, but it reeked of desperation and transactional affection, something I couldn't stand. You're talking about our daughter as if she's part of a business deal, Jace. That's not how a father acts if he truly wants to build a relationship with his daughter, I shot back, my frustration growing. Melanie, I'm just trying to show that I'm serious about making amends and being a part of her life. Helping out with finances is part of taking responsibility, he insisted, his tone suggesting that he believed the financial lure was an undeniable appeal. Responsibility isn't just financial, Jace, and re-entering her life should be about what she needs emotionally and psychologically. It's not about what you or Linda need from her. I'm not going to let her be used as some kind of therapy doll just because you think it might help, I said, the term therapy doll leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Jace paused, likely not expecting the firm resistance. I understand your concerns, Melanie, really I do. Let's just think about it a bit more, all right? I'm sure we can find a way to make this work for everyone, he finished, his voice a blend of coaxing and desperation. I sighed, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I'll think about the best interests of Ellie, but don't assume that means I'll agree to your terms, I responded, leaving the door slightly ajar, not ready to completely shut him out yet, despite my overwhelming desire to do just that. As I hung up, the unease lingered. His persistence was unsettling, not reflective of a genuine desire to mend ways, but rather a calculated move to use Ellie as a salve for his own life's mistakes. I knew any decision I made would require deep thought and consideration of Ellie's well-being above all else. The day after my unsettling call with Jace, I was caught off guard by an unexpected knock at the door. Opening it, I was surprised to see a woman standing awkwardly on my doorstep, her eyes darting nervously, a clear discomfort etched across her face. She introduced herself with a hesitant voice. "Hi, I'm Linda," she said, swallowing hard as if the words were difficult to form. "I know this might be the last place I should be, and I'm really sorry for just showing up like this." I could see the struggle in her posture, the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly torn about being here. The air was thick with an uneasy tension as she stood there, in the home of her husband's ex, a place she never imagined she'd visit under such circumstances. I stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in, my own curiosity piqued by her unexpected visit. As we moved into the living room, Linda seemed to shrink a little, visibly uncomfortable, surrounded by the evidence of a life her husband had once shared with another family. She took a seat, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap, and looked around the room with a wistfulness that spoke volumes. "Melanie, I'm here because I felt you should hear this from me directly," Linda began, her voice steadier now but still carrying a tremor of unease. "Jace has proposed something concerning Ellie that I only just learned about, and I want you to know that I am completely against it." The seriousness of her tone drew me in, and I nodded for her to continue, my apprehension growing with each word. "I was devastated when I found out," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Jace thought that spending time with Ellie might help me cope with our recent loss. But I told him. I was horrified at the idea. It's not right to use a child that way, and I never agreed to it." Her eyes met mine, filled with a genuine sorrow and regret, making it clear how deeply uncomfortable she was with the entire scenario. "I'm dealing with my grief, but never would I want to involve Ellie in such a personal and painful process. It's unfair, and it's inappropriate," she added, her voice firm with conviction. Linda's distress was palpable, and despite the bizarre nature of her visit, I felt a surge of sympathy for her. Here was a woman who, like me, was being swept up in the wake of Jace's ill-considered decisions. "Jace seems to think that this might somehow fix our marriage, that it might ease his own guilt over abandoning Ellie by bringing her into our lives now," Linda confessed, looking down at her hands, twisting a ring around her finger nervously. "I told him he was wrong, that we can't use Ellie to mend our relationship." As we talked, I realized how much strain Linda was under, caught between her grief and being unwittingly dragged into Jace's attempt to reconcile his past mistakes. The awkwardness of her sitting in my living room, a space filled with memories that she had no part of, underscored the complexity of the emotions we were both navigating. When Linda finally stood to leave, there was a mutual understanding between us, a recognition of being inadvertently entangled by Jace's actions. I walked her to the door, feeling a mix of relief that she had not been part of the plan to use Ellie, and a renewed determination to protect my daughter from any further emotional turmoil. As she left, the weight of our conversation lingered. Jace had not only deceived me, but had also deeply affected his current wife, proving once again his disregard for the emotional well-being of those around him. It was clearer than ever that my priority was to safeguard Ellie, ensuring she remained insulated from the fallout of Jace's unresolved issues. Knowing the full extent of Jace's deceit, not only from his own lips, but confirmed by Linda's horrified revelation, I felt a cold resolve settle over me. I needed to protect Ellie from becoming a pawn in Jace's desperate attempts to mend his fractured life and marriage. With this resolve, I called Jace, intending to lay down clear boundaries once and for all. "Jace, this has to stop," I began, my voice firm and unwavering over the phone. "You cannot use Ellie to patch up the mistakes you've made in your life. She's not a tool for your redemption or to salvage your marriage." There was a pause on the line, a silence that felt heavy with Jace's surprise and perhaps frustration. "Melanie, you're overreacting," he finally said, his voice strained. "I'm just trying to be part of her life, to do what's best." "Best for who, Jace?" I cut him off, not willing to let him spin his narrative. "Certainly not for Ellie. What you proposed is not only inappropriate, it's harmful. I won't allow it." Despite my firm stance, Jace's desperation overshadowed his judgment. Just a few days later, I received a call from Ellie's school informing me that Jace had attempted to pick her up. He'd told the administration he had scheduled time with Ellie, leveraging the few rights he had never formally relinquished. Thankfully, the school, aware of our situation, had protocols that prevented Ellie from being released without my explicit authorization. I was livid. Jace's audacity to go behind my back, to almost steal Ellie away to use as an emotional crutch, was a line crossed that could not be ignored or forgiven. His actions confirmed my fears. He was willing to manipulate and endanger Ellie's emotional well-being for his own gains. That evening, as I held a confused and slightly shaken Ellie, soothing her with reassurances and her favorite storybook, the reality of what could have happened had the school not been vigilant was chilling. My next steps were clear. The following morning, I contacted a family lawyer, a step I had hoped never to take, to discuss how to legally restrict Jace's access to Ellie and secure full custody. The legal process was stressful but straightforward, given the circumstances and Jace's history of absence and recent reckless behavior. My lawyer presented a compelling case, detailing Jace's long absence in Ellie's life, his recent disturbing actions, and the potential harm to Ellie's psychological and emotional health. As the court proceedings unfolded, I felt a weight lifting with each document signed and each approval stamped. Finally, after what seemed like an endless stream of meetings and court dates, the judge granted me full custody of Ellie, with strict stipulations on Jace's visitation rights, supervised and minimal to ensure Ellie's safety and well-being. Jace's reaction to the court's decision was one of anger and disbelief. He had underestimated the legal system's stance on the welfare of children and overestimated his ability to manipulate those around him. His sporadic, supervised visits with Ellie were tense and uncomfortable, a stark reminder to both of us of the consequences of his actions. As I watched Ellie play in the park, free from the burden of being anyone's therapy doll, my heart was both heavy and relieved. Heavy, for the path we had to walk to get here, and relieved that Ellie's future was now protected from being overshadowed by her father's mistakes. The legal boundaries set were firm, a fortress safeguarding her innocence and joy, ensuring Jace could never manipulate his way back into our lives to the detriment of Ellie's well-being. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of legal battles and emotional confrontations, I found myself in the quiet of our living room, watching Ellie as she colored peacefully at her small table, her brow furrowed in concentration. It was in these moments of calm that I allowed myself to reflect on the tumultuous events that had unfolded. Despite the chaos, there was a profound sense of peace that came from knowing I had acted swiftly and decisively to protect my daughter from being unwittingly caught in the crossfire of adult issues. The experience, though harrowing, had strengthened my resolve as a mother. It reaffirmed the sanctity of the safe haven I had built for Ellie and me, a place of love, stability, and protection. The ordeal had also sharpened my instincts and deepened my understanding of the protective measures necessary to shield Ellie from unseen emotional dangers. My commitment to maintaining this sanctuary was now stronger than ever, fueled not just by love, but by an acute awareness of the vulnerabilities that had almost compromised our peace. Ellie, for her part, remained largely unaware of the magnitude of the situation, a testament to the measures I had taken to preserve her innocence and happiness. She continued to thrive, her laughter and joy a constant reminder of why every struggle was worth enduring. As I watched her grow, not just in height, but in spirit and resilience, I knew that the quick actions I had taken had spared her from a burden no child should bear. On the other side of this ordeal was Jace, whose manipulative tactics had not only failed but backfired spectacularly. His marriage to Linda was now on precarious ground, strained by the revelations of deceit and the misuse of trust. The community's backlash further isolated him, as friends and family withdrew their support, appalled by his willingness to exploit his own child for personal gain. Jace found himself confronting a life fraying at the edges, a stark contrast to the stability and warmth that Ellie and I now enjoyed. His visits, though supervised and infrequent, were a constant reminder of the consequences of his actions. During these visits, I saw a man grappling with regret and the repercussions of his past decisions. He was a figure diminished, not just in the eyes of those around him, but in his own self-perception. Each interaction with Ellie, under the watchful eyes of a supervisor, was a moment filled with what-ifs and could-have-beens, a painful echo of the father he might have been had he chosen a different path. As I close this chapter of our lives, I do so with a heart fortified by trials and a clear vision for the future. The legal safeguards in place are not just formalities, but bulwarks against potential threats, ensuring that Ellie's world remains untouched by the turmoil that once threatened to engulf it. Our lives, intertwined around our small but fierce family unit, continue forward with renewed vigor and a deeper appreciation for the tranquility we've fought so hard to preserve. In this journey, I've learned that the role of a parent is not just to provide and nurture, but to shield and fight when the world encroaches in unwelcome ways. Ellie and I, together, look to the future not with apprehension, but with hopeful anticipation for the new memories we will create, secure in the sanctuary I have fortified for us.